The courtroom buzzed with quiet whispers, the kind that filled the air with tension. It was an ordinary morning in Judge Lisa Monroe's courtroom, but today felt different. The usual crowd of lawyers, defendants, and spectators had settled in, awaiting their turn for justice. But today there was a boy, small, fragile, and sitting alone in the defendant's chair. His name was Marcus, and no one could have guessed the storm he was about to bring to this calm courtroom. Lisa Monroe, known for her stern yet fair approach, walked in with a confident stride. Her sharp black robe swept the floor, but her eyes remained focused on the docket in her hand. As she sat down, the room went silent. But then she noticed him, the boy at the front, eyes down, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. His deep brown eyes didn't look up once. His head was slightly bowed, and his body language screamed of fear and resistance. "Mr. Williams, will you please state the charge?" Lisa asked, glancing at the lawyer standing beside Marcus. The lawyer, a young man in his late 20s, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Your Honor, this is Marcus, age 12. He's accused of stealing a wallet from a convenience store." The courtroom murmured as the judge processed the information. It was a simple enough case, one that many would brush off as nothing more than a petty crime. But there was something about the boy that didn't sit right with Lisa. He hadn't said a word since he entered the room. His silence weighed heavily on the space. "Marcus," Judge Monroe called gently, but firmly, "do you understand why you're here?" Still, there was no response. Marcus didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor. It was as if he couldn't hear her, or perhaps didn't want to. Lisa's face softened, but only for a moment. Her job was to be impartial, but this boy's silence made it difficult. "Marcus," she said again, her voice a little louder this time, "do you understand the charges against you?" The boy's eyes flickered for a brief second. Then, slowly, his head tilted slightly, but still no words came. The lawyer beside him shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to proceed. The silence in the room grew thick, suffocating almost. Everyone's eyes were on Marcus, waiting for him to respond. Judge Monroe studied the boy, trying to read his face, but there was nothing. It was as if he had closed himself off completely. Suddenly, the air shifted. The quiet tension broke, but not in the way anyone expected. Marcus stood up slowly, his small frame trembling. The courtroom held its breath as the boy took a step toward the bench. Everyone, even Judge Monroe, was taken aback. What was he doing? Marcus started, his voice barely above a whisper. The entire courtroom leaned in, straining to hear. "I don't want to be here anymore," he muttered. Lisa leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "Marcus, it's okay. You're not in trouble. Just tell me what's going on. You don't have to be afraid." For a brief moment, Marcus seemed to hesitate, his eyes darting around the room. Then his gaze landed on her, on Lisa. Something shifted in him, something unspoken, and then the words came. "You're my mom," he said, his voice clear now, but still trembling with emotion. The room froze. The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Everyone, including the judge, was struck silent. Marcus' eyes locked onto hers, and Lisa felt her heart race, her mind going blank. The boy wasn't just some defendant in her courtroom. He was someone who thought she was his mother. Lisa's face turned pale, her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she didn't know what to do or say. Her mind spun, and her professional composure began to slip. Was he confused? Was this a mistake? Lisa stared at the note, her breath catching in her throat. The room seemed to spin around her. She had been a foster parent once, long before her career as a judge had taken over her life. But she had no memory of ever fostering a child named Marcus. And yet, the court record clearly showed that Marcus had been placed with her family before. This was the moment Lisa had feared. The moment when everything she had known about her past would crumble and reveal a truth that would change everything. She wasn't just the judge handling Marcus's case. She had once been part of his life. Greg stood by, waiting for Lisa to process the information. He knew this was the turning point in the investigation. Lisa, still in shock, turned the pages slowly, as though she was waiting for something to change, for the truth to shift into something more familiar. But it didn't. The truth was undeniable. Marcus wasn't just a boy who had walked into her courtroom. He was a part of her past, a past she had long since buried. With a heavy heart, Lisa knew what she had to do next. She had to confront Marcus. She had to tell him the truth. No more secrets. No more wondering. The truth had always been there, hiding in plain sight. And now, it was time to face it. As Lisa made her way to the courthouse that afternoon, she couldn't help but wonder. What would Marcus think when he learned that the woman he had called his judge was the same woman who had once taken care of him as a child? And what would it mean for both of their futures? The courtroom was eerily quiet, with every single person in the room still in shock. Marcus stood in front of the judge, his small body trembling with uncertainty. Judge Lisa Monroe, despite her usual confidence and control, felt her own hands shaking slightly as she clasped them together on the bench. The air was thick with tension, as if the room itself had drawn a deep breath, and was now holding it. She tried to steady herself, taking in Marcus's words again. "You're my mom." The simple phrase echoed in her ears, reverberating in her mind. She had been a judge for years, seen countless cases, and dealt with all sorts of emotions and drama. But this was different. This felt personal. This was something she wasn't prepared for. Marcus was still standing there, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. He was just a boy, no older than 12 or 13, yet his words carried the weight of something far heavier. Judge Monroe had never expected a situation like this in her courtroom, and she was struggling to make sense of it. "Marcus," Lisa began, her voice soft yet authoritative. She needed to keep her composure. "Why do you think I'm your mother? I don't understand." The boy's face, which had been a mask of confusion and fear, softened just a little. His lips trembled, and he wiped at his eyes with his sleeve, trying to control the emotions that were threatening to spill over. The courtroom was still, everyone waiting for him to explain, but Marcus remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I saw your picture in the paper a long time ago. It was a photo of you at a charity event. And I remember my mom showing it to me." His eyes flickered briefly to the prosecutor, a man who had been watching the exchange with growing confusion. "She told me you were my mom," he added, his voice faltering. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She had no memory of ever being in the news for a charity event, let alone being linked to someone like Marcus. She knew nothing about his family. As a judge, her life had always been public in certain ways, but this was something entirely different. How could this boy believe such a thing? How could he be so certain? She looked at the boy, her heart aching for him. There was something in his eyes, a depth of pain, a longing for something he had never known. His mother, whoever she was, had clearly made a lasting impression on him. But what did all of this mean? How could she, Lisa Monroe, possibly be the woman he was looking for? The silence in the room grew unbearable. Lisa finally took a deep breath and addressed the courtroom, though her words were shaky. "Everyone, please, I'm going to ask you all to leave for now. We need to have a private conversation." The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder as the spectators slowly stood, uncertain of what was going on. The prosecutor and defense attorney exchanged confused glances before slowly exiting, leaving only Lisa, Marcus, and a few staff members in the room. As the doors shut behind them, the tension seemed to amplify. Lisa motioned for Marcus to sit, and he did so, his eyes still fixed on her, as if he were waiting for some kind of miracle. She sat across from him, feeling more and more out of place. How was she supposed to handle this? She was a judge, not a mother, not a savior. She wasn't prepared for this. "Marcus," she said again, her voice gentle now, "can you tell me more about your mother? Do you know where she is?" Marcus shook his head, his eyes filling with tears once more. I don't know. She disappeared when I was small. I used to think she'd come back. I thought I'd find her one day. I didn't know how. But I thought I would. Lisa's heart clenched. She could hear the desperation in his voice, the same desperation she had seen in countless faces in her courtroom. But this was different. This was personal. I'm sorry, Marcus, she said quietly, her eyes softening. I wish I could help you find your mom. But I'm not her. I'm not the one you're looking for. Marcus's eyes flickered with confusion and a hint of disbelief. But I saw the picture. You look like her. You're the only one who looks like her. I knew it. I knew you were my mom. Lisa swallowed hard. It was clear that Marcus had built up an entire world around the idea that she was the one he had been waiting for. She was his answer. His mother, lost but not forgotten. But she couldn't give him that. She couldn't be who he needed her to be. For a moment, Lisa felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She wasn't his mother, but she could see the pain in his eyes. The years of longing and searching. He had been abandoned in ways she couldn't even imagine, left to navigate life without the one person he had needed most. The following days were filled with unanswered questions, but the answers were slowly piecing together like a broken puzzle. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that her life had somehow crossed paths with Marcus's mother in ways she hadn't realized. Every time she looked at the picture of herself from that charity event, her heart beat faster. There was something more to the image, something she needed to remember. Lisa had arranged a meeting with Greg, hoping that his findings would help her understand the link between her, Marcus, and his mother. She needed closure, even if it was painful. As she entered Greg's office, he waved her over to the desk where piles of paperwork and a laptop were spread out in a hasty fashion. His eyes were tired, but there was a sense of urgency in them that made Lisa's heart skip a beat. I found something, Greg said as he pointed to the screen. Take a look at this. Lisa leaned over to see what Greg had uncovered. The screen showed a series of documents, photographs, and articles. There was one photograph that caught her attention immediately. It was an image of Linda Ellis, but this time, she was standing next to Lisa's mother at a community event that Lisa barely remembered attending. She hadn't thought about her mother's involvement with charity work in years. The last time she had seen her mother happy was when she was still alive, before the accident that left Lisa alone in the world. But there it was, an image of two women standing together, smiling, holding hands with a group of children. Linda Ellis was there, her face clear, her smile warm and familiar. And beside her, Lisa's mother. It all started to click. Linda Ellis wasn't just an acquaintance from a charity event. She had been involved with the same organization that Lisa's mother had worked for, an organization dedicated to helping foster children. But why had Linda left Marcus with only a picture of Lisa? Greg clicked through the files, bringing up more details. Here's the strange part, he said. Linda wasn't just a volunteer at the events. She was involved in the organization's leadership, and she had made significant donations over the years. But after that event, she completely vanished from the public eye. No one has heard from her since. Lisa's pulse quickened. She felt as though she was standing on the edge of something much bigger than herself. Why did she disappear? And what does this have to do with Marcus? Greg ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident on his face. That's what I can't figure out. There's no clear reason why she left. No one seems to know where she went, but one thing is certain. She had strong ties to the organization. And that photograph. Lisa nodded, her mind racing. I don't understand. Why would Linda give Marcus a picture of me? What was she trying to say? Greg looked at Lisa, his gaze serious. I think the only way to understand this is to find out more about Marcus's past. We need to track down his history, his real mother, his adoption. That's the missing link. The following morning, Lisa was back at the courthouse, this time with a new purpose. The search for Marcus's mother had turned into something much bigger, something that involved not just the boy, but also the hidden chapters of Lisa's own life. The more she thought about the possibility of a connection between herself and Marcus's family, the more she felt like there was a truth buried deep within her memories that was about to come to light. As Lisa walked into her office, her phone buzzed with a new text. It was from Greg. She quickly opened it and read, "I found something. A case file from years ago. Marcus was involved in a custody battle. He was taken away from his biological mother at a young age. It looks like the court record has a hidden detail, one that mentions a link to your family. You need to see this." Lisa felt her stomach drop as she read the message again. A link to her family. Her heart raced, but she didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat and rushed to Greg's office. The case file he had found was buried deep in the archives, but it held a secret that neither Lisa nor Marcus could have imagined. When she arrived, Greg handed her the file. It was thick, filled with legal documents and records. She flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. And then, in the middle of the file, she saw it. A small note, barely visible among the pages. It read, "This child, Marcus Ellis, has a biological connection to Lisa Wilson, who has been the child's caretaker in prior foster placements." Later that evening, Lisa sat in her apartment, flipping through the files Greg had sent over. As she pieced the information together, she realized there was something more to Linda Ellis than she had first assumed. Linda wasn't just an ordinary person who had attended charity events. She had been deeply involved in the charity organization that worked with foster children, a field that Lisa had always been passionate about. The more Lisa read, the more it became clear. Linda Ellis had dedicated her life to helping children like Marcus, children who had been abandoned or left behind. But why had she disappeared? Why had she left Marcus with only a picture of a woman who had been a stranger to him? It was in that moment that Lisa realized that this was no longer just a case. It was a journey, one that could reveal hidden truths about her own life. The truth had always been right in front of her, but now it seemed just out of reach. And as the night wore on, Lisa made a vow to Marcus. She would uncover the truth, no matter where it led. She wasn't going to let this boy's search for his mother be a lonely one. Tomorrow, she would start looking for answers. Answers that would not only change Marcus's life, but would also reveal something about her own hidden past. And with that, Lisa's search for the truth had begun. Lisa felt a chill run through her. There was something about this that didn't sit right. She had been at that charity event, yes, but she had never met Marcus's mother. Or had she? The pieces weren't fitting together, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized how little she knew about her own past. There were gaps in her own memory that she had never questioned before. But now, everything was starting to feel connected in ways she hadn't expected. "I'm going to find out what happened," Lisa said, her voice firm. "We'll get to the bottom of this. Together." Marcus looked up at her, hope shining in his eyes. "You really think we can find her?" "I do," Lisa said. "I think we can. And we'll start right now." As they both stood up, ready to face whatever came next, neither of them knew that this search would change both of their lives in ways they never could have imagined. But one thing was clear: Marcus was no longer alone. And that was the first step toward finding the answers they both needed. The courtroom might have emptied, but for Marcus and Lisa, their journey had only just begun. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city as Lisa walked through the courthouse parking lot. Her mind was still spinning from the conversation she had with Marcus. The boy's words echoed in her head. "One day, you'll find her." It was as if a weight had settled on her chest, but it wasn't the weight of the case or the boy's painful past. It was the weight of an unknown truth pulling her towards something she couldn't explain. She slid into her car and closed the door behind her. The world outside muffled for a moment as she sat in silence. How could this boy, with no connection to her, have seen that picture of her from so long ago? And why would his mother have given it to him, telling him to find her? Her phone buzzed in her lap, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from an old friend, Detective Greg Owens. He had always been a reliable source for information, especially when it came to complicated cases. Lisa quickly typed out a message asking if he knew anything about Marcus's mother or anything related to the picture. Before she could hit send, her mind wandered back to the moment when Marcus had looked up at her, the desperation and hope in his eyes. He had clung to that idea, that image of his mother and the connection to her. And yet, there was something else about Marcus, something beyond the image of hope that seemed to resonate with Lisa on a deeper level. Lisa remembered what her own mother had told her when she was younger. Sometimes, life leads you to the answers you need, even if you don't know you're searching for them. Her mother's words seemed more meaningful now, as Lisa began to understand that this journey was about more than just Marcus. It was a path to uncovering something about herself that had remained hidden for years. The next day, Lisa sat at her desk, staring at the photo of herself from the charity event. It had been a night she barely remembered, a blur of polite smiles and small talk. She couldn't recall anyone close to her who had spoken about the event in any meaningful way. It was just another one of those events where the wealthy and influential came together, and everything else became a forgettable memory. But Marcus's mother had remembered. Marcus's mother had seen something in that photo that had led her to make a strange promise. And now, that promise was pulling Lisa into a search for the truth. Lisa couldn't ignore the feeling that something about this whole situation was connected to her past, a past she had long since buried. Was it possible that her life had been touched by Marcus's mother in a way she didn't remember? Or had she known someone close to Marcus's family? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sharp ring of her office phone. She picked it up without looking at the caller ID, too lost in her thoughts. "Hello. Judge Wilson." Greg's voice came through. "I've got some information for you. It's not much, but it's enough to start putting some pieces together." Lisa straightened up, her mind snapping to attention. "What do you have, Greg?" "I ran the name of Marcus's mother through some of our databases," Greg said. "It took some time, but I found something interesting. Her name was Linda Ellis. She had been connected to several charity organizations over the years. One of them, the same one you were involved with, had a project that spanned over several years. And here's the kicker. She was involved in a similar charity event where you were pictured. But here's the twist. No one remembers her clearly. It's like she disappeared after that." Lisa's heart began to race as she processed the information. "Wait, you're saying that Marcus's mother was connected to that event?" "Yes," Greg confirmed. "She was there, but no one can recall much about her. I'm guessing you were probably too busy to notice. But what's strange is that she wasn't just anyone. She was in the same circle, working with the same people you know. I'm sending over the details now." Lisa's hand shook slightly as she placed the phone down. The connection between her and Marcus's mother was becoming clearer. At least, she thought it was. But it was still unsettling. Why had Marcus's mother chosen her? Why had she left such an ambiguous clue for the boy? Lisa stared at the picture of herself, the familiar face of someone she had once known. It suddenly felt like a distant memory, but now it was as though it held a deep secret. She needed answers. She had to dig deeper. The rest of the court proceedings were a blur to Marcus. He no longer cared about the outcomes or the judgments being passed. All that mattered was that, for the first time, he had someone in his corner. Lisa wasn't just the judge overseeing his case. She was now the woman who had given him a second chance at family. And that, more than anything else, was the most powerful thing of all. As the final moments of the trial unfolded, Lisa made a vow to herself. This case wasn't just about legal justice. It was about healing. It was about redemption, and above all, it was about giving Marcus the life he deserved. And for Marcus, the feeling of being truly seen, truly understood, was a gift he had long thought was impossible. He wasn't alone anymore. As the gavel came down, signaling the end of the trial, it wasn't the verdict that lingered in the room. It was the promise of a new beginning. And that was something neither Marcus nor Lisa would ever forget. The courtroom had emptied, leaving behind only a few scattered papers and the heavy sense of unfinished business. Marcus sat quietly on the bench, his eyes downcast, lost in thought. Lisa stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the image of the young boy's face, the hope, the desperation, and the confusion all mixed into one. She had to know more. She had to understand why he had connected her with his mother. Lisa had been a judge for years, and in all her time in the courtroom, she had never come across something so personal, so deep. The boy had trusted her in a way that went beyond the legalities of the case. His pain was raw and real, and Lisa couldn't ignore it. She turned back to Marcus, who hadn't spoken since their brief conversation. He was still clutching his jacket, his fingers nervously twisting the fabric. She could see that he was scared. Scared of the unknown. Scared of the truth. And she knew that, deep down, Marcus was just a boy who had been abandoned. No one should feel that alone. "Marcus," Lisa said softly, walking back toward him. "I need to understand more about this. I know you're scared. I know you've been through a lot, but I need to know everything you remember about your mother. You told me you saw her in a picture. Can you tell me more about it? Anything you remember could help us figure out what happened." Marcus blinked, his eyes still clouded with confusion. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Lisa sat beside him, her voice calm and patient. "It's okay," she reassured him. "You can tell me. I'm here to listen." Marcus took a deep breath, his fingers still twisting the fabric of his jacket. His eyes slowly lifted, meeting hers. I remember her face. I don't know where the picture came from, but I remember my mom pointing to it and saying, 'One day, you'll find her.' I think that's why I thought you were her. Because I thought if I saw you, maybe it would bring her back." The words stung Lisa's heart. She could see it now, how deeply Marcus had held onto that hope, how much he had clung to the idea that finding someone who looked like his mom could somehow bring her back. It was the kind of hope that only a child could have. The kind of hope that could keep someone going, even when everything else seemed to fall apart. Lisa's mind was racing. The picture. The words his mother had said. There had to be something more to this, something that connected Marcus's mother to her. But what? Lisa wasn't sure, but she knew she couldn't let the boy go without answers. She couldn't let him keep carrying this burden on his own. "Marcus," Lisa said, her voice steady, "I think we need to start looking for answers. I can't promise we'll find your mom right away, but I can promise that I won't stop helping you. I won't let you go through this alone." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes again, but this time, they weren't tears of confusion or fear. These were tears of relief. For the first time, he felt like someone was listening to him. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone in his search. But there was one question that Lisa couldn't stop thinking about. What had Marcus's mother meant when she said, "One day, you'll find her"? Why would she have said that? What had she known? It didn't make sense, and yet Lisa felt like she was on the edge of something much bigger than just this boy's story. There was something at play here, something that connected Marcus to her in a way that went beyond chance. "Let's start with the picture," Lisa said, breaking the silence. "Do you have it? Can you show me?" Marcus nodded and pulled out his phone from his pocket. His hands were trembling as he navigated to the photo gallery, but he finally found it. He handed the phone to Lisa, his eyes searching her face as she examined the image. It was a photo of Lisa herself, taken years ago at a charity event. Lisa recognized the picture immediately. She had been wearing a formal suit, standing with a group of other influential people at the event. But why would Marcus's mother have had this photo? Why would she have shown it to him? Lisa's mind was swirling with questions. "Marcus," Lisa asked, her voice carefully measured, "where did you get this photo? Did your mother say where she found it?" Marcus's gaze dropped again, and he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't know. She never really said. She just showed it to me one day and told me I would know her one day." She glanced at the other people in the courtroom. There were whispers now, shocked and confused murmurs. The bailiff stepped back, unsure of what was happening. Even the prosecutor looked startled. Marcus, still standing there, had no idea of the impact his words had just had on the entire room. He was simply stating what he believed to be true. His small voice rang out with complete sincerity. "You're my mom," he repeated, his eyes locked with hers. "I know it. I've been looking for you." The courtroom was in complete chaos. Some gasped, others stared in disbelief. The defense attorney couldn't believe what he was hearing, and the prosecution didn't know how to react. But in all the noise, Lisa stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Her thoughts raced. She had no children, at least not that she knew of. She had never given birth. She had spent years building her career, focusing on her work. But this boy was speaking to her like she was someone he had known for years. For a brief moment, everything around Lisa blurred. She saw flashes of memories she had long forgotten. Memories of a decision she had made years ago, a decision that had shaped the path of her life. But those memories were buried so deep that she couldn't pull them to the surface fast enough. How could this boy be claiming her as his mother? Her mind swirled with questions. Had she missed something? Was this some kind of mistake? Or had life brought this child to her in a way she never expected? "Marcus," Lisa said, her voice shaky but trying to remain calm. "Why do you think I'm your mom?" The boy's eyes filled with tears now. "I saw you in a picture once," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You look like her. You look like my mom." The room held its breath. The air was thick with uncertainty. Everyone was waiting for something, anything, to happen next. And for a moment, in the silence that followed, Lisa Monroe felt her entire world shift beneath her. Something was happening in this courtroom that no one could have predicted. "You said." The courthouse was eerily quiet as Lisa walked through its grand halls. Every step felt like a heavy thud in the silence, echoing in her chest as she tried to process everything she had just uncovered. The truth she had been searching for was now right in front of her. A truth that linked her life to Marcus in a way she never expected. She wasn't just his judge. She had been part of his childhood, part of his story before her career had taken over her life. As she walked towards the courtroom, she could feel her heart racing. She knew what she had to do, but the fear of confronting Marcus weighed heavily on her. What would he think of her? What if he didn't remember her? And what if he hated her for not being there when he needed her the most? Her thoughts were interrupted as she reached the courtroom door. She paused, took a deep breath, and pushed it open. The room was filled with the usual court staff, lawyers, and a few spectators, but her eyes immediately found Marcus. He was sitting quietly, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, looking down at the floor. His posture had changed since the first time they had met. There was something more mature about him now, a weight on his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Maybe it was because he was beginning to understand the complexities of the legal world, or maybe it was because he was starting to realize the truth that had been hidden from him for so long. Marcus glanced up as Lisa entered. His expression shifted from the usual indifference to something more curious, more alert. He didn't know it yet, but his entire life was about to change. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. There was no turning back now. She made her way to the bench and took her seat, locking eyes with Marcus as she did. The room fell silent, as if everyone could sense the gravity of what was about to unfold. "Marcus," Lisa began, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions churning inside her. "There's something I need to tell you, something important." Marcus raised an eyebrow, a slight hint of confusion in his eyes. He had been through so much already, and he had no idea how his world was about to shift even further. "You don't know this," Lisa continued, "but you and I have a history, a past that I never expected to resurface, but one that changes everything." The room seemed to hold its breath as Lisa's words hung in the air. Marcus shifted in his seat, looking both confused and intrigued. "I was your foster parent, Marcus. Before you came into the system, you were in my care for a time. But I didn't know it was you. I didn't know the child I once cared for would end up here, in my courtroom, as a young man in need of justice." Marcus's eyes widened, his gaze flickering between Lisa and the other people in the room. It was as if he was trying to piece together the puzzle she had just thrown at him. His jaw clenched slightly as he tried to process her words. You were my foster mom?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Lisa nodded slowly, her eyes softening with a mixture of guilt and regret. "Yes, I was. But I lost touch with you after you were placed in another home. I never thought I'd see you again, let alone be in this position." Marcus's face twisted into a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "But why didn't you? Why didn't you ever come back for me? Why didn't you try to find me?" Lisa's heart broke at the pain in his voice. "I wanted to, Marcus. But my career took over. I became so focused on my work as a judge, and I thought I had done what I was supposed to do. But I never stopped thinking about you, about what happened to you." The room seemed to close in around them, the weight of the truth sinking in. The courtroom that had once felt so cold and distant now felt incredibly intimate. It was just Lisa and Marcus, facing each other, two people who had been unknowingly connected by fate for so long. There was a long pause before Marcus spoke again. His voice, though quiet, carried a depth of emotion that Lisa wasn't prepared for. "I didn't know who you were, but I knew I needed to see you again. When I saw you in that courtroom, I felt like you were someone who could help me, someone I could trust." Tears welled up in Lisa's eyes. She had spent so many years thinking she had failed Marcus, thinking that she had abandoned him when he needed her the most. But now, in this moment, she realized that maybe she hadn't failed him after all. Perhaps this was fate's way of bringing them back together. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "I should have been there for you. I should have fought for you." As the courtroom slowly emptied, Lisa and Marcus lingered. It was as if the world outside had faded away. Neither of them cared about the crowd, the cameras, or the reporters. All that mattered now was the unspoken connection between them, the recognition that they were no longer strangers. They were family, bound together by something stronger than the legal system. And for Marcus, as the weight of everything began to sink in, he realized that this was only the beginning of his journey. No longer a lost child in a broken system, he was now someone with a future, someone who mattered. He wasn't just a boy from a foster home. He was Marcus, and he had a family now. The door to the courtroom opened, and the sound of footsteps echoed in the hall. But Lisa and Marcus didn't move. They stood together, united in a moment of understanding. This was their moment, one that would change everything. And as the last of the courtroom's lights dimmed, it was clear that no matter what came next, they would face it together. It was the start of something beautiful, a new beginning. The truth had been revealed, a family had been reunited, and the courtroom was no longer just a place for judgment. It was a place where healing could begin. The end of the trial wasn't the end of their story. It was just the start. The courtroom had fallen silent once again. Lisa stood, looking out over the sea of faces, but her thoughts were only with Marcus. Her mind was spinning with everything that had just been revealed, the truth that had finally come to light. It felt as though a weight had been lifted from her chest, but at the same time, a new sense of responsibility had settled in. She wasn't just a judge anymore. She was family. Marcus was sitting there, his eyes locked on her. There was something in his gaze now, something that had never been there before. It wasn't just curiosity or confusion. It was trust. And for Lisa, that meant everything. "Your Honor," a voice broke through her thoughts. She looked up and saw the attorney who had been presenting the case, his tone stern. "We need to proceed with the case. There's still a matter at hand and—" "I know," Lisa interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "But first, I think there's something more important we need to address." She turned to Marcus, who was still watching her, waiting for her next words. "Marcus, what we've uncovered today changes everything. It doesn't just change the course of this case. It changes both our lives." There was a long pause before Marcus spoke, his voice steady despite everything that had happened. "What do you mean?" How does this affect the case? Lisa smiled gently, feeling a surge of warmth inside. She had wondered for so long whether she would ever be able to make amends for the past, whether the years that had passed would be too much to overcome. But this moment felt like the beginning of something new. "You're not just a case to me, Marcus," Lisa said, her voice softening. "You're family. And that means I'm going to fight for you in ways that I would fight for my own child." She looked at him earnestly. "This is about more than just the legal system. This is about righting a wrong. This is about giving you the life you deserve." The room was still, everyone hanging on her words. Even the attorneys, who had been so quick to focus on the legalities of the case, now seemed to recognize the weight of the situation. This wasn't just about a courtroom anymore. It was about a bond. A family that had been torn apart and was now being given a second chance to rebuild. "I don't know what to say," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. His hands gripped the edge of the table as he leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "I never thought I would be here, in front of you, hearing this. I thought I'd be alone forever, lost in the system, never knowing who I really was. But now, I don't know what to think. How do we even move forward from here?" Lisa's heart ached at his words. She had always wondered what happened to Marcus, what became of him after he was taken from the foster home. She had never expected to be part of his life again, let alone in the way she was now. But now that the truth had been revealed, she was determined to make up for lost time. "Moving forward means we face this together," Lisa said, her voice steady and full of conviction. "You're not alone anymore, Marcus. We'll figure this out. Step by step, we'll do this together." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression softening. It was the first time in a long while that he felt a sense of hope, real, tangible hope. He had been through so much in his life, from being abandoned as a child to fighting for his own justice. But now, in this moment, with Lisa by his side, he didn't feel alone. For the first time, he felt like he had a family, a place to belong. The sound of footsteps approaching broke their quiet moment, and Lisa looked up to see her colleague, the court officer, standing at the front of the room. He gave a subtle nod, acknowledging that it was time to continue with the legal proceedings. But for a brief moment, Lisa felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. "Let's finish this," she said, standing up and turning to Marcus. "I promise you, I will fight for you. We will get through this, no matter what." As they moved back into the legal discussion, Lisa knew that this case would not be like any other she had ever presided over. It wasn't just about the law. It was about making a family whole again, about repairing the broken parts of her past and ensuring that Marcus would never feel abandoned again. And for Marcus, as the trial continued, he knew that no matter what happened, this courtroom, this moment, would always be the beginning of something new. A new chapter in his life, one where he was no longer just a case file or a number in the system. He was someone with a future, someone who mattered, and someone who would always have a place to call home. Marcus shook his head, his eyes hardening with determination. "It's not about what you should have done. It's about what you're going to do now." Lisa looked at him, surprised by the fire in his eyes. Marcus wasn't angry, not in the way she had expected. Instead, he seemed empowered, as if the truth had given him a sense of purpose. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. "I mean, you're not just my judge," Marcus replied. "You're my family. And you've been fighting for me this whole time without even knowing it. I know it's complicated, but now that we know the truth, you can help me in ways that no one else can." Lisa felt a surge of emotion, her heart swelling with pride for Marcus. He was right. The truth had given them both a chance to start over, to rebuild what had been lost. She was no longer just the judge in his case. She was part of his story, part of his family. "Okay, Marcus," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "We'll face this together. We'll figure out the next step, and we'll make sure you get the justice you deserve." For the first time in a long while, Lisa felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had been given a second chance, not just to make things right with Marcus, but to finally confront the past and embrace the future. As the courtroom settled back into its usual rhythm, Marcus and Lisa shared a quiet moment of understanding. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, they were no longer strangers. They were family, bound together by the truth. And together, they would face whatever came next. But then, something else happened. She saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. It wasn't just a search for a mother. It was a deeper need. A need for someone to believe in him. Someone to listen. To see him as more than just a boy in a courtroom. Lisa's resolve hardened. She wasn't his mother, but she could still help him. She could still be the person he needed. She took a deep breath and leaned forward, her voice firm but compassionate. "Marcus," she said, "I'm not your mother, but I can help you. You don't have to go through this alone. We'll find a way for you to be safe. We'll figure this out together." Marcus looked up at her, his eyes wide. For the first time, he seemed to believe her. It was a small step, but it was enough. For now, it was enough. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was different now. It was no longer filled with confusion and uncertainty. It was filled with the possibility of hope. And in that moment, Lisa Monroe knew that this case would change her life in ways she couldn't yet understand. But it had already started to shift the world around her.